we just watched Exit 8. So what is Exit 8? I know it's kind of an obscure movie.
It takes heavy inspiration off of the looping mechanism that PT popularized, while also having like the backrooms liminal space kind of feeling of emptiness.
Now, keep in mind, this is a Japanese movie, so if you do go to the theater to watch it, it's going to have subtitles. Again, this is kind of an obscure game, but you can kind of get the gist of it. The movie does a pretty good job of just showing you how it works, and it's, you got to find an anomaly, kind of like I Spy, and if there is an anomaly, you go back. If there isn't, you go forward. And you have to do that 8 times to get out. That's why it's called Exit 8. So that's basically the premise of the movie.
I'm just shocked that they managed to get a game as low plot as Exit 8 and turn it into a full feature-length film.
I mean, let's be honest, the game doesn't really even have a plot.
The story for this movie is kind of just completely made up, but it's not a bad story by any means.
No, I think it's pretty good.
No, I think it's really good, and it's pretty compelling. It gives you a reason to actually watch this, and it builds upon like the mechanics of the game.
This movie is sort of horror, but not really. It's more like creepy, but I suppose if you're just not into any kind of horror, I guess maybe you skip, or if you just maybe don't have that high of an attention span, because this is kind of a slow movie.
TikTok fans, do not watch this movie. It ain't for you.
Yeah, I mean, I would describe it more as like a psychological horror movie. Like you're not gonna like, there are jump scares in here, but very, very few, and it's mostly just on building up tension through like the atmosphere, seeing if you can notice like the subtle differences between each loop.
So this is kind of where our non-spoiler section ends. If you like games that are like backrooms type game, honestly, I think you'll enjoy the movie just because it kind of actually feels like you're playing along. You're watching like a let's play, basically. Towards the beginning, at least.
Like for sure. Like the beginning section is literally just a first-person view of like the character going through like all the tunnels, and it just looks really cool.
So moving on to like spoiler, discussion, explanations. So the first thing to note is that the game's like loop thing is kind of supposed to be like a metaphor, at least in the movie, for like modern routine. Like, going to work, coming home, watching TV, like modern routine.
It's the average blue-collar worker, white-collar, I'm sorry.
I mean, blue-collar too, but especially in like Tokyo and stuff, like don't be taking the trains and all that stuff. So,
well, that's true. But in this movie, though, it heavily like towards the white-collar worker,
like all the workers are wearing suits and all that stuff,
It makes me wonder if the Exit 8 loop is supposed to be like purgatory.
Yeah, a character in the movie brings that up too.
It's pretty on the nose.
Like quite literally.
It could be purgatory. I mean, the game never explicitly states this, mostly because it doesn't have a plot. But I do like the idea of like, this is purgatory, and it's kind of meant to be like a lesson to whoever gets stuck there, right? Because a lot of these characters, they have their own personal like problems.
In fact, other than like the problem of the main character being a dad, right, and he has to face that, kind of something that would point to him being dead is actually his asthma problem. It seems random, but it almost seems like he's kind of dying, like running out of breath as he's getting into like the world. Now, I don't like the interpretation that he's dead, because it kind of sucks if he is, but that is an interpretation of it, is that he's dead.
But this movie actually does a little bit differently than the game as well. So it does switch perspectives at some point. So there's not just one character in this movie, and the character, so if you ever played the game, the man that walks by you every time you go through a loop, he's a character in the game. He's called the Walking Man. Full disclosure, none of these characters have an actual name. They're just called the, like, Lost Man, the Walking Man, the Kid. So it does switch perspectives to the old man at some point, and he gets his own loop and everything. And it's like we're mentioning regarding like the lesson of taking care of your kid, right, and being a parent. It does seem like this character also has his own story regarding parenthood. Sounds like he was an absent father, and at some point he's helping the kid, who's one of the major characters, through the exits. There is a scene where he gets a little bit of a crash out. To say a little bit is a little, it's cutting it. It's a big crash out.
And ends up ditching the kid.
Which
is kind of a metaphor, because, I mean, I don't know if you caught on to this, but the old man is kind of supposed to actually be the main character as an old man.
Yeah, I think that's one of like the valid interpretations that you can make, and that's like the interpretation that I had
in the bad timeline.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, this is what the main character could be in the future if he had just ignored his responsibilities to like take care of his kid, and then like now realizing too late that he just can't take care of him, you know?
Now the kid is kind of up for interpretation because it could be his son, which is very heavily implied.
Yeah.
But because his son isn't really born, it could be like him seeing himself as a kid.
Yeah.
Because, you know, fathers tend to see their sons as like a mini me.
Yeah.
So it could be both, or it could just be that it's supposed to be the son. Either way, it's up for interpretation.
Yeah, like the surface level interpretation would be that it's just like, I don't want to say grown up version because like the kid's not even born yet, but like
future
it's
son.
Like, it's like
his
a future
son.
version of his son that he's helping get through this loop. But yeah, there's so many different ways that you can take this, and that's kind of like one of the interesting things about the movie is that they give you enough so that you can make your own interpretations as to what all of this means, but like it still gives you a through line that you can follow.
What I like about what this movie did is, so in the game, a lot of the anomalies are kind of hard to catch. But in the movie, they don't really do that. Instead of making them hard to catch, they actually make it hard for the individual character. Like when the main character gets a phone call, or when the old man starts kind of getting somewhat flirted with, I guess. I don't know what you
you could say that.
The kid's mom. Every character gets a specific struggle that makes them struggle to go forward or backward, either way. And that, you know, that's something that's unique to the movie, right? Because in the game, it's just it's either hard or it's not.
One thing I feel like the movie does is it seems like whoever gets permanently trapped in the exit kind of becomes a part of the exit 8.
Yeah.
The only reason I say that is because the man, right, the old man, I guess he thinks he finds the exit. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that way because he becomes part of the loop, just like man walking who doesn't have any sort of emotions or just doesn't seem like he's actually part of the world. And it seems like that's the case for anyone who gets trapped there. They don't become human anymore.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a line where the main character even says like, "Oh, that man is not human anymore."
It's not human anymore. That whole thing adds to the interpretation of you're being put to the trial. Can you get through this loop? And if you can't get through the loop, then you become part of it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the loop kind of breaking the loop represents like getting out of that routine.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I kind of still haven't figured out what the girl represents. Who is the girl?
Probably at some point was trying to exit the loop and probably got stuck in there and became part of it.
Right, but it seems a little weird, right? Because the old man and the kid, they both represent something, but like the girl. So what do you think?
My interpretation of the girl, she looks like she's very young, right? She could be a high schooler.
She's wearing a high school uniform.
She is wearing a high school uniform. She's a representation of like freedom before you're stuck, like we mentioned, being a parent, you know, working a day-to-day, week-to-week job with no like spare time for yourself or like anyone else. She kind of is meant to represent like the freedom aspect, being young, right? Not having responsibilities, not being a parent. She has like this rebellious attitude to her. I just feel like maybe that's the interpretation.
I guess if I wanted to keep it, since we're assuming that the other characters are like versions of the main character, we could assume that maybe that's like a younger version of his like girlfriend or whatever they are. Maybe
that wouldn't be a bad.
Yeah, because like. The when we see her interact with somebody, it's with the old man, and she, like you said, she was kind of flirting with him. So maybe that's like the beginning of like their relationship, like it represented inside of the loop. Maybe
I actually like both of those ideas for what it represents. I thought of a couple. One that I thought of was that it could represent the voices, your inner voices, like towards yourself, like telling yourself like, oh, what are you doing with your life, and things like that. That could be one interpretation. Another one could actually just be she represents something about that world. Like we don't know that much about the world, but she could just be like, typically these kinds of worlds inhabit some kind of demon or something. She could be that.
Yeah.
Right. But there's a lot. There's a lot of open-ended interpretations for her. Yeah,
I mean, like one game that this movie really reminded me of was Silent Hill, just because of like the metaphorical like aspect of it. Where like Silent Hill is basically purgatory, at least in Silent Hill 2.
Silent Hill 2 is its own personal purgatory.
Yeah, so like if I had to have like a like for like comparison for what who that character might be like. It's Maria.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, because Maria was like this free-spirited, kind of like dangerous, but in a really flirty way, in a really like not I wouldn't say like a sleazy way.
Just from the dialogue she has in the movie, it seems like she's kind of trying to tempt the old man into wanting to stay inside of the loop and not want to like leave it.
Right. So, that's why I said it's kind of like a demon of that world.
Yeah. So.
Well, yeah,
or the demon on your shoulder.
Exactly.
I could see that. And you know what she said to the old man is why I had my interpretation, because she's like, man, it must be like hell to have like a job where you have no freedom, like you're stuck doing that your whole entire life. Which is where I said like she represents like the rebellious side, not having responsibilities, you know, not having worries the same way that man did.
So earlier we were talking about how this movie has very Japanese context. This particularly comes into play during the train scene where the mom with her baby, like the baby screaming, and some guy's like, hey, shut that kid up. I say it's a very Japanese thing because in America, somebody's
gonna be like, yo, shut the fuck up.
Bro, sit down. Like, shut up. Yeah. Or even the mom will be like,
shut your ass.
Shut your ass up. Yeah, like,
in Japan, it's mostly about being polite, right? You don't want to be too outspoken.
You don't want to stand out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Another thing that this does represent, and it's something that you could tell the people who made the movie wanted to talk about, because it probably deeply concerns them, the birth rate in Japan. Japan, in really the world, I can't just say Japan, has had like kind of a deep-rooted problem with its birth rate. And this movie is all about parenthood and the responsibilities of being a parent. Like we mentioned earlier, the main character, he's asked if he even is going to be there for his child. And
because they're broken up.
Because they're broken up, right? But it comes down to like the joys of being a parent, right? The worries of being a parent. Not everyone feels like they're ready, but it's not a reach. I don't think it's a reach.
One thing that I found interesting is that the movie kind of frames it that if he does decide to be a father, that he also kind of has to be a husband. I mean, they don't say that, but in the like weird vision of the future that he gets, he's like there with the mom, and they don't like kiss or anything, but it's like kind of implied that they're like a family.
Right.
So this kind of supports what you just said of like, no, don't break up. You're gonna
have children, have many children.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that doesn't always work out in real life, but I can see how in Japan that's especially important of a message to have.
Right. Yeah. We eventually get to the end of the movie where it does feel like the movie in itself just looped completely. We start where we began, where the main character's in the subway, and he hears that businessman yell at the mother for her crying child. You could say the movie taught, or throughout the movie, he was taught a valuable lesson. And so at the end, it is widely assumed that he stood up for that lady, because he takes off like one of his headphones, and you kind of think for a moment, is he going to put it back on? Is this just going to loop around to the beginning? But he walks over towards like the direction of them at the end of the movie, meaning like he learned his lesson. He kind of got some values through that loop.
Yeah, it's heavily implied that he went over to walk over to them.
Yeah, tell them shut the fuck up.
I mean, they ended the movie in such a way that it was supposed to be left up to interpretation.
But we can interpret it.
Come on, like
there's really like only one interpretation you can give it, right?
I mean, what are you gonna say? He walks over there and then walks back because he's still. Could you imagine?
Yeah, but like even everything that had built up in the story up to that point is just like, okay, he's learned his lesson. He even says it in like the last phone call that like one of his regrets was seeing this interaction take place and not being able to tell this person to fuck off, basically, right?
Yeah. So, it's not very subtle about that part. Yeah.
But overall, good movie. I wish like they would have thought about releasing exits 1 through 7 before this one. I feel like we're missing some context here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like obscure movies like this.
I mean, like I knew nothing about this movie other than it was based on a game that I saw a clip of once in a while.
Yeah, I didn't even know about the game.
Exactly.
But we went home and we finished it in like an hour and a half.
And it was a fun time, you know? So
we're smarter than the people who were in the movie. I'm just saying, guys, that girl that was walking through the Walking Man's section, looking kind of, you know what I mean?
All right.
Okay.